fly, if it clings to the tail of a thoroughbred horse, can travel 10,000 miles. And the green ivy that twines around the tall pine can grow to 1,000 feet. Such a wonderful quotation. So I view myself as a blue-assed fly. So, at any rate, Mr. Toda had a great struggle, but thanks to him, we're all here today. Thanks to Mr. Makiguchi, Mr. Toda, and Sensei. The only reason we're here. It's incredible thought how delicately, what a delicate thread it was that great law and its propagation hung on over those periods during World War II. So, as I said to you, please read on part 2 in your own time, but one point two points really, I want to just bring out very quickly. It'll mean going on for another 5 or 7 minutes. Is that okay? As we've gone over time a bit. The first one is that, sorry, lost my notes. Where am I? Here we are. I think one point's enough, because I'm sure you're getting ready for your lunch. But this is a very important point. As you know, as this problem with the priesthood grew, I tried to write as best I could, or as clearly as I could, in the bulletin, the sort of history of the priesthood in Japan. A history of gradual corruption, basically. This came to its height in the Tokugawa shogunate era, as the shoguns, who deliberately gave the priesthood a secular authority over their parishioners. That is to say, not only a position of religious authority, but also an authoritative position from the point of view of the system of government. And as a result of this, of course, the priests viewed themselves as being on a higher level than their parishioners and the villagers who surrounded them and went to their temples. And they also used their position of authority, not every priest, of course, but many did, in order to extort money for various services. This is, to this very day, common in all forms of Buddhism in Japan. Whatever you ask for, you have to pay for it. If you want a prayer to be made for your sick mother, you jolly well have to pay for it. If you want a funeral conducted, you have to pay a great deal for it. Whatever service they gave, they charged for. And as a result of that, of course, being a priest became quite a sort of good job. You know, it was almost guaranteed to give you a good income. And Japanese people today, generally, the public generally, I'm afraid, look down on Buddhist priests. I'm not talking about Nichiren Shoshu and Soka Gakkai, but the general public look down on priests as just pure money makers and frauds. But they'll still go because they're superstitious. When someone dies, they'll go to a temple, or when someone is they're going to have a baby, or whatever it may be. For these things, it's purely a lot of the time out of superstition. So this, of course, affected Nichiren Shoshu priests as well as all other priests in the shogun's times. And from that time onwards, although there were great high priests from time to time who well knew what was wrong and desired to change it, somehow or other that change has never been brought about. And this is probably because the lay people were very weak in numbers. The priests didn't do shakubuku hardly at all. And therefore, the Hokkeko sect, which was the lay society, consisted mostly of the descendants of families who had been members of this sect for generations. This also, by the way, was encouraged by the shoguns, because you were not allowed to change your religion nor could religion be propagated, and you had to follow the religion of your ancestors according to the law of the land at that time. So therefore these families over hundreds of years had been believers in Nichiren Shoshu, and it was they, 2,000 or 3,000 of them at the most, who made up the Hokkaido sect, and were of no great influence, of course. Added to that, as I've already explained, they didn't practice as the priests practice, and the believers were viewed as a source of support by the priesthood. So this is the way things were in Japan, and the way things have continued up to this very day. Though, of course, there have been in Nichiren Shoshu these great high priests from time to time who were well aware of the fact that things weren't all right by any means. So in this hundreds of years worth of corruption in the priesthood generally, suddenly, for the first time ever, a lay group arises which is following the teachings of Nichiren Shoshu, yet is legally not bound to it, for reasons I've already explained. And added to that, of course, Mr. Makiguchi and Mr. Toda had a very incredibly pure view of Nichiren Daishonin's teachings. They had to start, as it were, from scratch in finding the sources to develop their faith and understanding. And, of course, from there you have Sensei today, who is an extraordinarily, however strong he may be as a leader, an extraordinarily pure person. So their view of faith was totally pure, and they taught this to their members. So you had members, for instance, after several years, who could give great Gosho lectures, better Gosho lectures than some of the priests, an understanding of the Gosho which was often much more clear and correct than some of the priests. This phenomenon suddenly appeared in amongst the priests and caused, of course, great heartburnings. So it's not easy, as I've said several times recently, to be a good priest in accordance with what Nichiren Daishonin taught in the Gosho. I repeat so often the line which says that they should be people of small desires, who are happy and content with what they have. That is the way Nichiren Daishonin in one of the Gosho describes the qualities of the priesthood. And all the forces in Japan, it's as if they worked in a sense of history to the opposite end, to become people who wanted money and good living and so on. And then in Meiji times, 1860 or so, there was an edict from the emperor to say, no, it wasn't an edict, but the emperor expressed his view that he'd like all Buddhist priests to marry. I don't know why. That made it worse, because they all had families, children and so on to support and protect. And then, of course, they began to realize that their situation was tenuous. And in other words, some members think over this problem with the priesthood, just as they are taught over their own karma, that it must have been all of us who made the causes for this problem. But that is not so. The problem was the very appearance of the Soka Gakkai, of us. That is the problem. We have totally disrupted hundreds of years of good living, in a sense, and threatened it in the future. This is the truth of it. So the cause is the appearance of SGI, or Soka Gakkai. So it's important to be clear about this. It's not any person. It's not any one priest. It's not any one lay person. And I'm sure, as I said yesterday, I'd never thought, though I knew that we were bound to be attacked by the three powerful enemies, as the movement for Kosen Rufu grew, because so many Gosho, Nichiren Daishonin says that's bound to happen. But I never ever thought that it would be the second of those three enemies. The first one is influential people in society, such as journalists who, through their writings, attack the votaries of the Lotus Sutra. The third one is people in authority, government, who attack the votaries of the Lotus Sutra. And the second one is arrogant and cunning priests who think they have attained what they have not attained, and persecute and look down on the believers. So this is the one that, to all of our surprise, came to a head. So I think much more of a surprise to us in the West, perhaps, than that it was a surprise to Japan. Though when it came to a head, it was a great shock to people. But I think at some time or other, it had to. And it's important to be clear, in other words, that when the three powerful enemies appear, that is because the movement for Kosen Rufu is really advancing and growing. In other words, it's a sort of collective form of Sanchashima. If your practice is going great and you're really developing your faith, or you make a great vow in front of the Gonzen to do a bit of human revolution, often Sanchashima attacks in one way or another. Same thing, of course, on a grand scale in terms of the movement for Kosen Rufu. As it grows, so the three powerful enemies will appear and attack it. And that is exactly what's happening. So our task, of course, in the midst of all this, is to keep the flow of Kosen Rufu no matter what. We must keep it moving forward. Otherwise it could be set back for 50 years or more. And at the same time, chant strongly for the purification of the priesthood. So only in the head temple can this be solved. They have to start a movement themselves within the head temple to change this whole thing. So of course, when I say within the head temple, it could be started by a group of priests in local temples, which then affects the head temple. It's got to be within their boundaries that the great change occurs. At the moment, the head temple is ruled by a faction. There have for long been factions within the head temple. Certain families who have held power in the head temple over many years. And they tend to, in the past, to have vied against each other. And this has come much more to a head. There is one faction dominating the priesthood, and it is led by the present high priest. So at some point, someone is going to stand up, some great priest, and change all this. There must be probably 50% of the priesthood who would like to be good priests, as Nichiren Daishonin wanted in their hearts. But they need a leader. And I'm sure one will appear. So this is really, our chanting should be for this sort of priestly revolution, which can get things straight again and pure and right, so that we can have priests who we can really deeply respect. All right, everybody. Great. So I really hope you really enjoy the rest of your course. And thank you for listening patiently.
Thank you.